the House coming today.
We haven't had a lot of time going straight up to the floor and straight back here to discuss a lot of details, but on our first bill that we talked about with the income tax trigger, just in the interest of time, I'm not sure how much you like to negotiate back and forth. We could come in with an offer on the percentage for the budget stabilization fund. You could make a counter offer. We could go back and forth several times. Or I can just make what I feel would be a reasonable percentage offer, kind of a take it or leave it type of thing, and see where you're at. But the House would be willing to go down to 15% on the budget stabilization fund. That is enough to kick in that trigger now, should that income tax receipts threshold be breached. This guardrail would not hold that up. It would be in excess of 15% at this day and time. And so that would not be a provision that would hold that up. I think, if I remember right, Eddie said the budget stabilization is roughly $1.8 billion, 1.794, something like that.
Under fiscal year 2025 projections, it is 18.6% of the SGF tax receipts.
That's what SGF is now of the total tax receipts.
Yeah, that's what budget stabilization fund is now of total SGF tax receipts. Yes. For projections, of course.
Certainly. So, Madam Chair, I think the House would make that offer at 15%.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you don't mind, we'll come back to that. We'd like to visit. There might be some give and take on some other stuff, and so at some point, we'll take a good hard look at it. Thank you.
Madam Chair, just in the interest of time, what all obligations? I know looks like we're missing Senator Corson. Certainly want to respect his opinion and viewpoint on this. Do we want to go ahead and move forward? Or?
We do want to move forward. He's given me a heads up. There'll probably be a couple of agrees to disagree. Okay. So, but he is in transportation. We are keeping him apprised of what we're doing. So.
With that knowledge, do we need to get the process moving on? Do we need to go ahead and sign bill numbers and kind of start working on our package for each bill then? I don't know if, Eddie, do you know, do we have any other bills officially in conference at this point? I know I made several motions on the floor.
It's my understanding now that we have 5 bills in this conference: 2231, 2275, 35, 227, and 269. 2125 has been non-concurred to, but still needs a motion to accede by the Senate at hopefully at their next session.
We're back on the floor at 5, so probably at 5 p.m.
With that, Madam Chair, is there
So I do have a question, Mr. Chairman. You made a motion to non-concur on 5011?
Yes.
Okay, so are you planning on conferencing on that legislation?
Yes, we do have that. That should be in conference as well as soon as the motion to accede is made.
Okay, so that'll probably be at 5 p.m. too. So we can discuss that also. I appreciate you trying to move in time. I don't want to be here all night, and I know you don't either. So that would be great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you have any preference on which bills you would like to put what provisions in?
Mr. Chairman, I like the way we've done it in the past. Property tax, sales tax, income tax. I think it makes it easier for our colleagues. And, you know, we've got a good routine going. So if you wouldn't mind adhering to what we've done in the past, that'd be wonderful.
Certainly, I'd agree. And I would say, just because we are now bound to the rules of bundling, we try to maintain the content of any of these bills that we've got, try to keep the original, or the provisions as they are. I shouldn't say original, because some of these aren't original, actually, content. If we can try to maintain that, I think that would help us as we maybe try to bundle things that are, as you stated, similar in area of expertise, or just the area of income tax or sales tax or property tax.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we could start with, I'm thinking the contents of 2125, the Senate put some really good provisions in there. If we could start as a baseline with that and consider some of the items that you put in 35 and/or 2396 that the Senate committee did get a chance to look at.
Okay.
So we'll start with the tough stuff, I guess.
Sure. Amelia, would you be interested in giving us an overview on 2125?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. So Senate substitute for House Bill number 2125 has some property tax provisions. The first provision would extend currently there is an August 25th deadline for certification by taxing subdivisions of their budgets and their property tax to be levied of August 25th. That would be extended to October 1st. So whether or not so all taxing subdivisions, regardless of whether they had a revenue neutral rate hearing, would go to October 1st for certification of their budgets. The second provision would move the time for the county treasurer to send tax statements to property owners. Currently, the deadline is December 15th to have them mailed by. This would move that to December 1st.
Was there any provisions put in there? I mean, right now, we have a deadline, but if they don't get them out by that deadline, there's really no penalty. Is there anything imposed on December 1st?
No, there was no additional penalty. It was just the deadline moved up to December 1st.
There was a penalty on the October 1st.
That with respect to the budget deadlines, if a taxing jurisdiction did not certify their budget to the clerk, and their tax levy to the clerk by October 1st at 5 p.m., the county clerk would be using their prior year's budget and tax and property tax to be levied. But that's not related to the tax statement per se.
Okay.
There was no additional provision for county treasurers who did not mail tax statements before December 1st.
Okay. Going back to the October 1st, does the clerk have the authority to implement a levy that has not been adopted?
The language.
And that might be a question we have to follow up on, but I would think that there would have to be something that was actually passed and adopted by that local entity for that not to be an illegal levy.
The provision that is added in the bill is, the language itself is that the county clerk shall use the previous year's budget information and amount of ad valorem tax to be levied for such taxing jurisdiction.
Okay.
And we can double check that, but the thought process was, we've heard from clerks that entities are not turning in their budget or giving them the information so that they can get meet their deadlines and mail the information. And so this was an incentive for taxing authorities to get it turned into the clerks. They need it. That's basically what it was about.
Right. Representative Sawyer?
Yeah, we're squeezing that period. Right now, jurisdictions have till August 25th to get their budget to the clerk. And then the treasurer has until December 15th to mail the statements. Now we're really shortening that. We're giving local units till October 1st to get that budget to the clerk, and then the statements have to be mailed by December 1st. We're really shortening that period that the clerk and treasurer have to prepare the tax roll and do all that work.
So Amelia, would you explain, there's two different dates right now, August 25th and October 1st?
Yes, currently the general provision is that the budgets and ad valorem tax to be levied needs to be certified to the county clerk on or before August 25th, unless it is a taxing subdivision that is going through the revenue neutral rate process, and in that case, their deadline is October 1st. So the provision here would just make everyone October 1st.
I know it's been a long time since I've been county clerk, but I used to be county clerk back, that was in the 80s, but there are some jurisdictions that don't get their budgets in on October 20th, well, usually small ones by August 25th, where the clerk has to actually sit down with the township or the special and kind of work with them to do a budget and get all that done. And I suppose with that October 1st saying they just go to last year, it eliminates that. But there's a lot of work that's done to prepare, to figure all those levies and then prepare the tax roll and for the treasurer to do their work. I don't know. It's like I said, it's been a long time since I've been in that office, but I think we're putting a lot of burden on counties.
So I appreciate that you say that and are aware of it, because I reached out to several clerks, several treasurers. I made sure that this was not creating an undue burden, and most of them told me that they had it and that they really liked the provision of the October 1st if that budget's not turned in. That's the part that I think helped them, yeah.
But then we also said that the state tax statements have to be out by December. I mean, we're shortening both ends. That just concerned me a little bit, but.
They said that they had almost all of, every clerk I talked to said they had that information before December 1st. So they were not. There was another provision in the original bill, and that's the portion that they had, that they were upset about. It would have caused them major grief in their scheduling, and so we deleted that language.
I think just in the interest of time, this might be something we have to negotiate or talk through a little bit more, but I did want to finish, if Emil, you could go ahead and finish explaining the different provisions in the Senate sub.
Certainly. And then in addition to what we've already discussed, there is also the revenue neutral rate notices are proposed to be amended slightly. Some additional language to include the rates in addition to some of the current information. And then also there's an extension of the reimbursement from the state for the printing and postage costs of the county, extending that for another 2 calendar years for 2025 and 2026.
When you say the rates, is that, you're talking about the mill levy rates on revenue neutral?
Correct. It would be adding the mill levy rates from the previous tax year, so that would be included in a column, as well as the revenue neutral rates themselves. They were not included in the last version.
So you'd be including 3 different rates. You'd have the prior year, the revenue neutral, and then the proposed, if they hit, or I didn't know. I know there's another column that was, I think it's 2024 current year maximum tax that would be.
Yes, those 3 rates that you just expressed, those are the ones that are added in expressly within the content now.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And when you testified, Mr. Chairman, you brought up some good points, like the column down on the line with the meeting notices and stuff. I think that could be used for something else. I could think it could be a lot more productive. I know you had a couple of good ideas that I think would make that form even better.
Okay, I don't think we have any further questions on 2125. Sorry, this is a tennis match. I'm not sure who's got the serve right now, but Madam Chair, would you have any, since it does look like we have several shells coming in, would you be more comfortable now taking a look at 2275 and putting all the local sales tax authorities into that one?
Yes, we could take a look at that. I don't want to sign off on anything right now, but tentatively, we can definitely visit about that. And you're thinking Finney County, Pawnee County, and Jackson and Seward County?
Yes.
Then, okay, yeah.
And if you're willing to consider 2377, that would kind of fit along with those, that freeze of the sales tax apportionment.
We will take a look at that. I like the work that you did on that. We knew it was an issue. It's kind of like the balloon. You poke one place. So we didn't want to try to change that this year, so the freeze makes sense. But we will absolutely consider that.
Thank you. Do we want to go ahead and pick which bill we would want to put the income tax trigger provision in?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That'd be great.
I'm not really seeing anything that really is an income tax bill right now.
Would 269 work?
That's exactly where I was looking.
Okay. And then we can put the BOTA fees in with the property tax stuff that we come up with.
Certainly, I think that would fit well.
Okay, great. Yeah, we don't want to lose the BOTA provisions. I know it may not seem like much, but we found out when we were investigating this summer and fall that people would have to pay annually in order to keep their case in front of BOTA. And so it just makes sense to pay one fee until you get the case heard.
Absolutely. I think that might have been unanimous in the House, and I think the Senate as well. It was on consent calendar, if I remember right.
It was the consent calendar. So did you guys change it? You must have.
We did. We specified that it was per parcel. So if an entity appealed on one property, but then they decided to make a new appeal on a different property later on, they do need to pay that filing fee on a different parcel. But if it's the same parcel, absolutely not. They should not have to pay an additional fee.
Sounds good. We'll have to look at that when we put it in. Thank you.
If we're going to be looking at the property tax pieces, Madam Chair, would you be interested in the provisions of what's currently Senate Bill 35 that had the contents of 2396? It contains the protest petition language, the Astra Fund language. It has the 20 mil reauthorization for the statewide 20 mil levy. Obviously, if we're going to look at revenue neutral, we would remove the repeal of the revenue neutral language on the House side.
Mr. Chairman, yes, we really liked, especially a couple of the provisions that you had in that legislation. You did send us two different forms of it, and so yes, we would like to work through the differences on that. And are you thinking that they would go in 21-25 also?
I was thinking that looked like it was a natural combination of those two items.
I think that's a good fit, Mr. Chairman. Yeah. So should we go over those provisions in detail?
Yes, be happy to.
Okay.
Anybody want to?
Senate Bill 35, as passed by the House, kind of included 4 provisions. The protest petition, and some of them are kind of linked together, of course. The protest petitions, which provide for a protest petition allowed to be filed in cases in which the taxing entity's budget increases by an amount greater than, I believe it is, inflation, but then also includes, I think, 2 additional provisions that provide for increases to that, the amount of tax that is attributable to new construction, and then also the tax that is to be spent on bonds that were approved at elections on or after July 1 of 2025. It would require such budgets to be adopted by a roll call vote, and it would provide that if a taxing jurisdiction does not adopt its budget in a timely fashion, it would not be permitted to exceed the threshold that would otherwise trigger the possibility of a protest petition. And these provisions would not apply to the state or to school districts. It then also includes the creation, within the protest petition, it also provides for notifications to be sent to taxpayers, providing information related to the protest petitions, an explanation of the process, including where the protest petitions might be available and a phone number to call to request a protest petition. The taxes levied of all taxing jurisdictions within the county for the current and previous year, the difference between those amounts expressed in dollars and percentages, a clear and conspicuous identification of a taxing jurisdiction whose budget is subject to a protest petition. It would provide for those to be mailed by county clerks. Any costs associated with the printing and postage of such mailings in 2025 and 2026 would be reimbursed by the state through a notification cost fund, and the bill would also, which would be created by the bill, and the bill would also provide for a transfer from the SGF to that notification costs fund. From there, it also creates the ASTRA fund, which stands for Acknowledging Stewardship of Tax Revenue and Appropriations. It provides for a $60 million transfer to that fund from the SGF by demand transfer on or before July 15th. That amount is to increase by 2% per year in future years. The amount transferred to that fund is apportioned across the counties, 65% on the basis of population and 35% on the basis of assessed valuation. Each county government and city government located within each county would then receive a proportion of the county's apportionment based on the total assessed valuation used to determine property taxes in the preceding year. Any county or city whose budget is not subject to a protest petition would receive that amount. Any amount attributable to a county or city whose budget is subject to a protest petition would not be paid to them and would go back to the state treasury to the credit of the state general fund. The bill then also does repeal the revenue neutral rate provisions, and it reauthorizes the statewide school finance levy for 20 mills for each of the next 2 school years.
There's quite a bit in there to digest, which we appreciate the work that you've done. Do you want to take them one provision at a time, or how do you want to? I mean, there's a lot in it.
Yes, Madam Chair, there is. And I think one thing I want to make clear is in the House version of Senate Bill 35, we were assuming repeal of revenue neutral, so we added in a new notification. I don't intend on requiring 2 separate notifications. If there's a way that we can combine the revenue neutral notice with the protest petition notice, it's not my intent to require 2 different mailings.
Mr. Chairman, I think we might have some work. I think that's a great idea. Like I said, you had some good ideas that could improve that revenue neutral letter too. So yeah, I think that would be excellent if we could do that. I would, I got to tell you, there was excitement on the 10% protest, the presidential. I know a lot of people think that threshold is high, which it is in some counties. It is absolutely high. But we would like to discuss the trigger mechanism for that. The Senate did take a look at it. We had a hearing on it. And what we passed out of the tax committee, we didn't get a chance to run it across the floor, was the CPI in Midwest Index or 3%, whichever's lower, plus the new construction and the bonding. I think we're all in agreement that we can leave, if the voters voted on the bonding, we leave that out of the equation. And so we're wondering if you might consider, for simplicity's sake, making the trigger 4% or CPI index and then leaving new construction out of the equation. And the reason we do that is we've consistently left new construction out. The rural counties don't see as much new construction, it's the urban counties. And one of the things I've heard from constituents is, what benefit do we get from the new development? We don't see anything, because a lot of times it increases the threshold it used to on the lid to be able to increase property taxes. So this way, it is a benefit right away, in the sense that the government is growing, but that new construction's excluded. We just thought increasing it percent, it might be a better threshold. So if you would take a look at that and consider it.
Yes, Madam Chair, and I'm very sensitive to that. That is a much easier mathematical equation when it comes to calculating that. I do wonder if that would penalize some rapidly growing areas. I'm from rural Kansas. That's not going to be anybody in western Kansas. But I think the statewide average, PVD said, was generally about 0.5%. So you're going to have areas like mine where it's probably 0.1% or around that level. I would think maybe 1% ought to be able to catch most of those. I'd have to look at the data for sure, but I also want you to understand that, you know, when you have new development, you have growth in your tax base. So that should theoretically lower the mill levy as your tax base grows. The intent with including that is to try to make it more specific to the area, because if you're in a rural county but you allow them 4% growth, maybe realistically that growth should only be, if it's CPI, I think the 10-year average is 2.6. So you're actually allowing a little bit higher growth than would be even under the CPI plus the new development. I shouldn't say growth, because some people associate that with growth and valuation, and that's not. This is new construction, new homes being built, new businesses coming in, things that are brand new to the tax rolls. So maybe I should say new development. I'll try to train myself on that. But as you have new development, theoretically, as I said, your tax base grows. I'm just trying to make it more specific to each area. I'm not sure what Johnson County numbers would be if we have that data, what their average new development is on an annual basis. But I completely agree, a 4% fixed limit would be much easier to calculate. You wouldn't have to go get information from each county every year. I think June 1st is when the clerks certify that to PVD, what new construction has been added to the tax rolls.
It's something that, if you wouldn't mind taking a look at, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you. And just for clarification, the Senate did do CPI Midwest or the percentage, whichever's lower. So if the CPI was 8% that year, then it would use the 4% base. Otherwise, yeah, so I could see maybe we need to, yeah.
So if CPI was 2%, It would be the 2% with no growth? Okay.
Yeah, we're yes, that's where we
I
were
don't think
at.
we're there, but we're really close.
Okay,
So.
wonderful. Senator Corson.
Thanks, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. I worry, this gives me a lot of heartburn because I do think it really hurts districts like mine that are growing rapidly to have new development being excluded when we have so much of that. In our area, I think that would be a real penalty to growing areas and a real detriment. You identified that. I know you know that's a concern, but just speaking from my perspective from a growing area, that's going to be a massive hit to us.
Senator, I very much appreciate that, but I think your threshold is almost impossible for the petition amount, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people are motivated to, I would hate to be the treasurer in your district that would have to have that increased traffic. So, but I understand, we'll consider thank you.
Is there any other provisions? You said you want to kind of take a provision by provision. Is there any other?
Yeah, Senator Corson.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Thank you. On the protest petition, since Madam Chair brought it up, I also have a lot of heartburn about that, just to be transparent, because I think it puts us in a position where it's sort of minority rule. And there's nowhere else in Kansas where we've said that basically 10% of people get to upset the will of the voters, the actions of their elected representatives, and make decisions for the other 90% of people. So I have a lot of angst about having a protest petition in there. I think at a minimum, it should be a protest petition that then triggers an election where everybody can weigh in. But to me, if you have elected representatives and they set a budget and they go through the process and they arrive at a budget that may be supported by the vast majority of their constituents who may want maybe spending at a certain level, maybe they want certain amenities, they want certain parks, maybe they want a new pool, whatever it is, and then you could have 10% of people come in and upset the apple cart. I don't think that's really fair, and I don't think that's how we make policy in any other way when you can have just a small minority of people who can upset the will of the majority. And we've always said majority rules, minorities have certain protections, but to me, this gets it backwards.
Yes, and if you remember when I testified, Madam Chair was gracious enough to let me testify in Senate Tax when we heard this bill. That's how I would prefer it. I would prefer it to be an election, but our current election calendar does not match up. Actually, if you look at the dates when the primary and the general election happen, and we have a 45-day, I don't know if you call it a mandate, that you can't have any special elections within 45 days of the primary and general. So we don't really have time for a special election. And in order to put it on you couldn't put it on the general election because tax statements are coming out about a week after that. You put it on the primary, you'd have to increase the budget process, move it up by about 2 months in order to get a budget accomplished in order to 45 days before the primary to get that on the ballot for that primary election. If we could figure out a way to do that, I'd be more than happy to entertain that because I do like the idea of an election better if we could somehow figure out how to fit it into the calendar.
Yeah, again, I just don't think 10% of people should be able to make a decision for the rest of whatever the municipality is. So I think I'm open to solutions to get around that, but that's my big picture concern with that.
So, and I would ask, is there any leeway on that 45 days?
I think all three of us would have to do some checking with our election staffers on that. I don't know that any of us are prepared to speak to that question immediately.
You'd have to have the 45 days for a special election, but I suppose we could make an exclusion for this. If there was a budget election, that could be held within the primary and the general.
So we just went the opposite on the Senate floor of excluding any financial elections for any date except April, August, and November. But I was wondering if there was a way to limit that 45-day window with something like this, with their budgets, to go on the ballot. I understand why the notice in the campaign, but, you know, if they're getting a letter that says, of course, they wouldn't get that letter until after on the election, so that would be different. But I like the idea of an election. Maybe we should spend a little bit of, if you want to stick with the protest petition, since you guys have passed it.
Madam Chair, I'm open to anything. Like I said, the only reason I came up with the protest petition was because of the calendar, and then also if you have a special election, who pays for it? If you have one entity that is a small entity and they're the only ones that are exceeding the protest petition limit, all of a sudden the burden falls on them to pay for the entire election. That's another concern I have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's keep visiting on this. Senator Corson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Along those lines, I was just wondering if maybe there's a way to just table the idea of the protest petition for this year. It's something we could look at in the interim, talk to folks about whether there are ways that we could work out some sort of an election provision and maybe take that up separately and look at some of these other provisions, which I think are good and constructive. And if there's a way, maybe we could just pull out entirely the protest petition piece for this year so we can give more study to how mechanically we could implement that.
Representative Sawyer.
You know, maybe another idea is make an exception for that December 1st statement. If in those cases where, let it go ahead and go on the November ballot. So those cases where you've had to have a tax lid election, you give them a later time to get those tax statements out. Because I was thinking about in my head, really, I don't know how many jurisdictions would be up. If you only have like one jurisdiction in the county, I was thinking in Sedgwick County, say one city had that vote, the clerk could have the rest of the tax roll ready except for that one. I mean, I think it may be a workable way if you gave them some leeway on getting the tax statements out.
Yeah.
Still do it, potentially.
No, it's a good point to look at all areas of this. The one hard number that I heard or date was December 20th. They want their money. And that's the only date that they ask that we not move or deal with.
Yeah, Representative Sawyer, I think my biggest concern with that is if they're restricted on that election, they need to adopt a new budget that's within that threshold, and that is currently what happens on October 1st. That new budget has to be certified. I haven't worked in the clerk's office as you have before, but you know, right now I know some of them struggle between getting that October 1st certification of the budget. They spend that whole month of October working on their tax rolls. That's where I hear most of my complaints, because we have, out in western Kansas, we have a lot of tax districts that overlap counties. So one county might be waiting on the tax rolls from another county. They struggle to meet that November 1st deadline when they have to certify their tax roll. And then I think November 15th is that next deadline. So I understand where you're coming with on that December 1st, but I think we're backing it up almost a month and a half. If they certify their budget on November 8th, let's say, is the election, I really think it's going to put those clerks in a crunch to try to get the tax roll certified. They get the budget certified, and then they get the tax roll certified, and then get tax statements printed and sent out.
I understand that. I mean, that's a crunch time. That's what worried me about even moving that August 25th date, because there is a crunch when you're trying for the county clerks to get the tax roll done in time so the treasurer then can do the tax statements. I mean, that is a crunch period. But if you're talking about it, I guess it depends on how many jurisdictions you would have. I mean, if you could get most of your tax roll done and you're only dealing with one, and it'd be kind of a one or another, and everything's computerized these days. That's why I was thinking that it may be something that might be doable, but I don't know. But it is. That's a real crunch time for the clerk's office, that time between August 25th and trying to get that tax roll done after that.
Well, I know we need to come to some decisions on this, but I do think we need to do a little bit more research before we agree to something on it this evening. But I don't want to lose it. I mean, you guys worked hard on that provision, so let's try to figure out what we can do to move forward. So the petition portion, the logistics on it, which is tied to the Astra Fund. And then if you are willing to remove the language that repeals the revenue neutral, and we would, you've been a champion for the fact on the 20 mil, taking a look at that language at some date. We might not be able to on this bill, but I'll bring up the fact that, you know, if we do have a value limit, then that would help in that respect, keeping it more revenue neutral. But I'd also ask that you consider the 1.5 mil that the state collects. The Senate did send you that provision in Senate Bill 35. I understand how this works up here, and we didn't take that as a rejection of 35, but maybe we should have. I don't know. Okay.
It wasn't. It was just a matter to expedite things, so that would be a Senate offer to include in this provision.
I think so. It depends on where we are on the vehicles and stuff, but we would like you to consider removing the 1.5 mil that the state collects.
Okay. So now we would have, I think that would meet our, I might look to staff, if we included that provision, would that meet our limit of 4? Because we would be adding in, we talked about adding in the BOTA fee exclusion out of 269, the Astra money, or Astra and protest petition out of 35, and then the underlying 35? Or would we still have one more left to work with?
I think that would only be 3 ads, because if you're discussing doing this within 2125, so the 2125, the Senate version of it, underlying provisions, plus provisions from SB 35 as passed the House, plus SB 35 as passed the Senate, plus 269, I think you've only added 3 to it, so I do think you could add 1 more even potentially there.
Okay.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, this is a prime example of how that 5 limit is kind of hamstrings us a little, because the meat processing bill, Senate Bill 33, would fit in beautifully with 2275. It's a sales tax provision, it just changes the form, and because of this restriction, we may lose that provision at some point. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want people to understand. The last year's, we had many more tax provisions than what we have this year. It's not near what it's been in the past. So I just think it's kind of interesting the way it's going to play out. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Sawyer?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, since the chairman brought this up, on 2275, I think we only added 3 more, so we could have room to add 1 more bill on that one. I think we added 2004, 2390, and 2377.
No, I don't think so, because we've got Jackson County and Seward County.
Right?
That'd be 2.
Right, and then the 2377.
I've got 2004 also.
Right, that
That is
Seward.
Oh, that is Seward. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, so we're only at 4?
I think we could add 1 more to that bill. I think the reviser could verify that, but research.
Yeah, I believe you've currently just added, for 2275 has been discussed, you've currently added 3 bills and the applicable to add possibly 1 more.
So would you be okay with adding Senate Bill 33 to that?
My main concern is when we had the hearing, I reached out to a lot of my local processors out there. I heard back from a few of them, not all of them, but they had some concerns on removing the form completely, because if they ever got audited, they, as the retailer, are the ones that are responsible for proving to Department of Revenue which ones are tax exempt and which ones are not. So there's a little bit of concern from our retailers. It was explained that under current law, they have to have one of those forms every year if they don't have retail sales within a 12-month period. So I wanted to hold off on that until I got a little bit better answer, because I didn't want to place a more of a burden on them if there was a chance they did get audited, that they would have to produce that information.
So thank you for bringing that up. It was our understanding that the burden was on the customer, not on the retailer, but I'm not sure. Amelia's looking, yeah.
Mr. Chair, I can tell you what the bill says, but keep in mind, I can't predict how it may be interpreted. But the provision itself does provide that it makes the general statement that for this particular sales tax exemption, which is quadruple R, that the sales tax exemption certificate shall not be required to provide or the exemption certificate or form is not required to be provided to the seller, and the seller shall not be required to receive and maintain a completed exemption certificate or form for such exempt transaction. If the seller in the ordinary course of business believes that the service qualifies for such exemption, the seller shall be relieved from collecting and remitting the tax and shall not have the burden of proving that the service is not subject to tax pursuant to subsection A, which is an earlier provision of this particular statute that's being amended regarding that exemption certificate. In that it does provide that a purchaser improperly claiming the exemption shall remain liable for the non-payment of tax.
Okay, so does a purchaser, it says that last part, a purchaser claiming the exemption, if they're not filling out a form, is it just on, how do they prove whether or not they claimed it or not? Is it just on the word of the retailer? And we can talk about this a little bit more, but I just wanted to let you know that's why we didn't include that. Trust me, as a person who that's impacted, because I had a beef processed and I forgot to fill out my sales tax exemption and I didn't get it. So, but I understand the burden of filling out that form and trying to make sure that you have all your paperwork in line. I just didn't want to, by chance, put a larger burden on the processor if that was a.
No, I understand. That wouldn't be our intent either. And I would talk to your processor. That's a pretty big, that can be a pretty big bill, the sales tax on it. So, well, we can take a look at that and study it, then come back to it. I think we're pretty close on a lot of this. Working out the logistics, that's going to be the difficult part, the details. Did you want to visit about 5011 and see where we're at on that? Are you guys, I know we were at 3%. You had an average. There were a few differences there.
Yes, we did. I'll leave that up to you, since that is one that doesn't require any approval or input by the administration. I wanted to know if we wanted to maybe hold off on that until the end so we could focus on some of the things that we needed to get passed across the legislature first.
Sure, that's fine, but I've been asked several times today if we were going to move on that or not. I said I didn't know because we were negotiating on everything, so that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Chairman, so I know Senator Corson has been amazing. He's being called in 3 different directions. So should we try to figure out the details and then come back and hammer out where we're at, or how do you want to proceed with this? I think we're very, very close on a couple of these. And I think on all of them, actually.
Yeah, we just need to, I think, figure out maybe what we need to do to join the revenue neutral pieces with the House and Senate differences on that. There's some issues with the calendar, issues with the protest petitions. I will say I really don't want to lose that provision because that is the piece that is going to have the taxpayers will ultimately have the authority to hold the elected officials accountable by being able to stop a tax hike. I don't want to lose that piece because I really want to give that power to the people.
Understand, we've always said this is a three-pronged approach. I appreciate your work on that. I wanted to know if you want to keep it as a petition, a protest petition, or if you want us to explore dates and possibilities on the petition with an election.
If we could do an election and figure out how to make it work and figure out a way to either have the state pay for that, if that is required. I just do not want to have a small tax district have to foot the bill for the entire election if that's necessary. If we can answer those questions, I'd be more than happy to look at that.
Let's take a look at the logistics on that and see where we can get an agreement. I think you guys did some heavy lifting on this, and I agree with you. We don't want to lose that provision. Okay. When do you want to come back? And
Well, unfortunately, our calendars don't line up too well. We're back on the floor at 4 in about 6 minutes. You guys are in at 5. I anticipate we won't have anything. I think 4 o'clock is our last session for the day, and then we should have the rest of the evening open to whatever your schedule might allow.
should we aim for 5:30? Would that give us time to do our research too? And okay.
I think so.
Okay, that'd be great. I know it's going to be a long night, but if we do, we can get this, I think they can get it written so that we can vote on them tomorrow.
Absolutely.
That's the intent? Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.